Ah, fun. Well, what a joy to be here together. We were just talking about our real moments as captured on live through actually the app Be Real. And but we are excited that we get to be real here for the next 20 minutes or so with Vivian Mabuni. Welcome, Vivian,
Hey, good to be with you all.
and with my fabulous co-host, ELIZA CortÉs Bast. Hey, Elisa.
Hello, hello.
We're going to spend the first couple of minutes getting to know Vivian, just kind of fun, up close and personal stuff. But I did just want to tell you a little bit about her. She is going to be sharing her story and how God's story, the Bible, has impacted her and strengthened her purpose. And as we're getting together, we just do believe that every person has a seat at Jesus's table and that we can discover what we're here for, what our purposes are as we look at God's purpose through the Bible. So, Vivian is a national speaker, the author of Open Hands, Willing Heart, and the podcast host of Someday Is Here for AAPI Christians. She has over 30 years of ministry experience. I've been privileged to get to know Vivian up close and personal when she and I were at the same gathering together, and have been really ministered to her because she speaks deep. She's not a woman who's unafraid to talk about the things in our lives that may seem like they don't go with our faith. Like they're like, wow, that's really hard. How could there be a good God? And yet she also has a great laugh and really a surprising story. So welcome, Vivian. And Elisa would love to quiz you on some this or that questions.
Sounds great. I love that technology can bring us all together from very different places. So it's great to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. So, Vivian, we would love for our audience to get to know you better, and we are so privileged to have gotten to know you better as well. So, we're going to give you some this or that questions, and so we would love for you to choose, but we just expect you to answer the best way that honors who you are. So, morning or evening?
Well, I think parenting turned me into morning, but my true self is an evening.
Okay, and then so tell us what does true self in the evening look like for you?
Super soft pajama bottoms, big fuzzy socks, and a big warm blanket, and something warm to drink and a good book.
Okay, that sounds like comfort evening. So comfort evening is real Vivian.
Comfort, and I love parties too. So I guess I'm a little bit on the extremes too. I'm extroverted, so I gain energy. So a really great meal with friends, I'd get out of those comfortable clothes for that, for sure.
It sounds like the best scenario then would be the comfy socks with the people. Like if you could
Oh,
find a perfect spot, yes, with the two.
yes. Okay.
All right, mountains or beach?
Mountains. I grew up in Colorado, and I think the ocean is terrifying. My husband grew up in Hawaii, and he is just all of my kids, my husband, they love being in the water. And I just look around and go, there are very large fish with teeth in there. So I'm a mountain girl, and I love the smell of pine. My favorite tree is the aspen tree. I love especially Colorado in the fall.
I love it. Naomi knows a little bit about that too. So we'll have to ask then, fall or summer?
Fall, 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 fall. I love fall. I love the colors. I live in Southern California, so we don't have fall. And so I have all these fake leaves and I light all the candles just to kind of try to reimagine like what fall is like. But fall is definitely my favorite.
Beautiful. Book or podcast?
Now that's challenging. It's interesting because I think my brain sadly has been negatively impacted by social media, where I'm recognizing how my concentration has decreased in recent times. But I love a great book. I love a great book. The part of me that likes to get things done really likes the podcast option because I can work while listening and taking in information. So it's kind of 50-50 right there, like 50-50.
All right. So I have to ask as a personal wondering, like book on the Kindle or like crack open the spine, smell the pages of the book?
I love to smell the pages and turn, and I love highlighting or grabbing whatever writing thing. I just starring, underlining that helps me to stay engaged as well. Unless it's fiction and I'm just disappearing into another world.
All right, my last this or that question for me is roller coaster or boat ride?
Oh, not the roller coaster. Boat ride. I will take a boat ride, and a calm boat ride, like not one of those like on the Colorado River with the you know I at one point wanted to be an astronaut and then realized there's no way that I could, first of all the math part, but just the sheer like G forces. I'm not there for. I'm just, yeah, keep me on the ground now.
One day, Naomi, we're going to get a roller coaster taker. Nobody is a roller coaster. We can't get any takers for the roller coaster option.
Everyone around me loves them. And I can go on the Disneyland ones because they're a little bit less, they're not the Six Flags type. But no way. Like, I just think, why shorten your life?
I love it. Well, yeah, actually, Lisa and I were talking about how we like roller coasters. And yeah, and part of the fun of doing these this or that questions is how differently you answered, Vivian, in some ways than the last person we asked this of when we were last on a little while ago with our January featured writer who was Whitney Putnam, who you also know.
Oh, Whitney.
Yeah, we all love Whitney. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, just as we've been seeing you and your preferences, about this beautiful piece that you wrote about the God who sees us. And I, first of all, just wanted to find out if, when you were writing that, which is this beautiful piece about both how you, from your own childhood, um, it was extra important to be able to know that you were being seen, and there were some things that kind of made that difficult, honestly. But as you were writing this piece about Hagar in the Bible, first of all, maybe tell us a little bit about Hagar, who she is, for those who maybe don't know that story yet. And then maybe how did it feel for you as you were writing about her story and thinking about why you gravitated to writing about her, and maybe how that connected with Vivian's story?
Yeah. Well, I'm honored to be able to have taken some time to write. I love the Bible, and background for Hagar. It's Genesis, first book of the Bible, and there are characters. God is at work. His story is unfolding, and Abram and Sarai are kind of are pillars of our faith, and they are traveling to a place where God is yet to reveal. And so probably they think likely around chapter 14 is when Hagar enters the story of Abram and Sarai, because they're in Egypt at the time. And the Pharaoh gifts Abram with a bunch of slaves and cattle and camels and things like that. So she kind of joins his entourage. And the big thing in the Old Testament was that in the system, it was important to have sons to carry on the family name. And Sarai, after all of these decades, was still not pregnant. But God had promised Abram that he would have children that would outnumber the sands of the grains of sand on the beach. And Sarai was not getting pregnant, but God had promised. And so when they started to freak out, Sarah just said, hey, you should sleep with my slave Hagar and have children through her. And that was a situation that did happen in that time. Anyway, Hagar, who is an enslaved Egyptian woman who's at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the social totem pole of importance, is forced to sleep with her owner, and she does conceive and has a child. In that moment, all of a sudden her status changes, and she now is able to have some level of importance because she's carrying the child, the heir of the major person. And Sarah gets really upset and starts to treat her harshly, so harshly that Sarai ends up, or Hagar ends up running away into the desert. I think about that and think, how bad must it have been for a pregnant, young, probably teenager to run out into the desert? I mean, that's pretty desperate to want to go that far away from what was happening for her. And this is where it's amazing, because the God of the universe, who speaks the world into existence, comes after Hagar and calls her by name. Hagar, Hagar, where are you going? In chapter 16 of Genesis. And if you read the previous chapters, whenever Abraham and Sarah would refer to Hagar, they never said her name. They just talked about your servant, but never called her by name. And here the God of the universe saw Hagar and called her by name. So when I read that story, I think it's so easy for us to often feel overlooked, and to think that the God of the universe would know me in my difficulties or in my joys and call me by name. I think that when I became a Christian, I think that was one of the most amazing moments, was realizing my very first Christmas as a believer, singing all the Christmas carols I grew up singing, a tear streaming down my face, because it's like, I now understand what we were singing about. Oh, come all ye faithful, or all of these things. But at the same moment, I was being struck with how this God knows me and wants relationship with me. So that has just obviously been life altering in the best of ways.
I love that. And I love this quote from the article that you wrote, where you said, I would go from feeling invisible and overcompensating through striving and seeking validation through performance. So we were talking about how Hagar, yeah, she must have not only felt invisible, she must have felt overlooked if she was being treated that badly. Because going into the desert in those days, there was no, Motel 6, right? Right down the road. So in some ways, she was signing up to die, very uncertain future. And and then and so she fled. In your own story, where you were saying you would go from feeling invisible to overcompensating through striving, first of all, I relate to that. My own story is different than yours, but can you tell us, for the woman who's feeling that way right now, or the person who's feeling that way right now, who's joining us, what would you say is something in God's story that could be hopeful for her?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. First is that we just don't see the end of the story. And I think I have spent much of my life wrestling with finding that performances where I would get praise or acceptance, and sadly kind of moving that into my relationship with God, even that if I perform for God, he will like me more, or things will, like an exchange, like I do these things and then he will do these things, and not understand that's kind of contractual, rather than understanding that God has a covenant love that is not based on my performance. So for the woman who feels invisible, we don't see the end of the story. So in this moment of feeling invisible, this is not the end of the story. And so being able to know that there's, in the invisible times, we're also able to access intimacy with the God of the universe. And I believe that God forms character in us in the times of when we're invisible. There are seasons that we all go through, and kind of even going back to the this and that, like in fall, there's beauty, but there's this death, and that leads us to this quiet, which is an invisible time. But it's not that the tree is not still God's. I guess my point is that God is at work even when there are no leaves on the tree. And it's not intended that we stay forever in this invisible state. I believe that God redeems the painful, hard things as we yield to His work in our lives, and His the pressure and the pressing, the heat that gets turned up in our trials. None of it is wasted in God's economy. And I have seen that over and over. And I know, Naomi, you can speak to the truth of that as well, that, you know, in those times when no one sees but God, it's learning to be okay that God is the one that sees. And then understanding that it's not, there's more to the story than just this one particular moment or season.
That's so rich. As a person who lives in the northern Midwest, you know, there's those times, those dormant seasons can feel like, I mean, just death. It's, you know, it's just a lot. And so, but it is that reminder that there's something at work. Vivian, we're so grateful that part of the ethos and the spirit of every woman's story is that we are together in community. And so I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit into like, what are ways that people have seen you, or God has used people to see you, or women in particular in your life? And then what are some ways that you would encourage our viewers to see other people? Like, how would God use them to see other people or make people feel seen?
Yeah. Well, obviously this is what's so beautiful about this medium, is that we have video. And so everyone that can see, I am an Asian American woman, and grateful for God's specific design in making me an Asian American woman. And I think for me, my friends that have come alongside and honored that part of me has really made a difference, because in the past, growing up in Colorado with not a lot of ethnic diversity, I used to really think it was almost something to be a kind of attained to a certain level, when people would say, "Oh, I don't even think of you as Asian. I just see you as, you know, Viv." And that meant that they didn't see this part of me, which is my ethnic heritage, which is rich and beautiful. And it's a part that I don't want to have my friends miss. So when my friends see me, that has actually helped to build even more of my identity in embracing all of who God's made me to be. And this would be my encouragement to the women tuning in and listening, is that there is so much beauty to be seen all around us. And when our worlds are monolithic, so if I only stay in relationship with other Asians and I don't reach out beyond that, I'm missing out. And in the same way with my friends who only have one type of friend in their friend group, ethnic heritage wise, it's we miss out. And so my invitation would be for this community at Every Woman's Story is to take a moment and step back and kind of evaluate, like, who is in my life and how could I form relationships intentionally to learn of other backgrounds and histories and ethnic stories. I think our lives are enriched. I think of the different spices and seasonings and flavors and food. Just that alone is worthwhile, but just the richness that comes from it, because it changes how we read the Bible. It changes how we interact with the God of the universe. A lot of times, what I've learned is that in North America, Western culture, often our faith is so individualistic, and God intended it to be community all along, and that the Bible was written with community in mind. And the author of Hebrews says, "Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter." So it was our faith was meant to be lived out in community. And so, yes, we have our own relationship with God, but it was actually always designed that we would be learning and growing and deepening through our relationships with one another. So I love that that's such an important value in every woman's story.
Absolutely. And Vivian, as I think about that, I think about how when we are in community, we are both have the opportunity to be seen and to help people learn how to see, like your friend who somehow thought she was communicating something beneficial by saying, I don't see you as the way you actually have been made in the image of God. I see you as just Viv. Well, we are who we are externally and internally. And sometimes we need each other to say, this is what would be more helpful, is to acknowledge the God who I'm made in the image of, which means you can see me just the way I look, or I think people who are differently abled, you can see me just the abilities I have. You don't have to say, oh, I don't notice that difference in you. It's like this can actually be a gift to our community that, these are the abilities I bring. So I just want to thank you. I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind, because one of our little traditions here is to ask people for a conversation starter hashtag. That then we can take that and go, what do we think about that? So when we're thinking about the God who sees us and about us seeing and us learning how to see each other, love to find out, is there some hashtag that you'd say, use this and maybe talk about what it means with a friend?
Yeah. How about hashtag God sees us? And I think that encompassed in that is obviously the story of Hagar, and Hagar names God. She names God Elroy, which is the God who sees me. And so I think hashtag God sees us kind of ties in, Genesis 16 and the Hagar story, as well as this community, because God sees us. So in it, obviously, is that God sees me, but he also sees us. And so that would be my hashtag.
That works, man. That's everything, all in 3 words. So thank you. Vivian, it is a joy to know you, and I just thank you for how you share from your own life and your own story and point us back to God's story. So thanks so much. And for those again who have joined us, we've been with Vivian Mabuni, who is an author of a couple of books now, and Open Hands, Willing Heart is one of them. And I just really encourage you to get to know her better. I know getting to know her a little bit personally has been such a blessing to me, as is her message. She has several messages that really just hit the core for me. Our prayer for this time and our hope is that there is just one thing that you will not just let pass by, but you are grasp onto. Today, it'll be around the God who sees you, the way that you are invited to live into the truth that you're seeing, and also the opportunity to see others, and from the confidence that you are seen, to then look confidently in how you can see others for how they are really made in God's image, and celebrate and encourage them as well. So God bless you. Thanks for joining us for Every Woman's Story. Elisa, good to be with you as always. And and we are looking forward to continuing the story through hashtag God sees us. Take care.
Bye.